can you see this moving dot? That's where I'm drawing.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Okay, so the deal with this calculator, this is actually a pretty good calculator. You can do a lot of stuff with it. The basic stuff, as you see here, these are kind of the normal calculator functions that you do. The only ringer here is watch out for this. This key, this minus key, is used for subtracting. This key down here is used for entering negative numbers. Okay, so if I want to enter -3, I say -3, and that's what you get. That's not the same as subtract. Okay, this key here clears everything in the display. All right, let me go back and start out with just setting up the display so that it makes some sense. This is a little deep, but you got to do this in order for the display to work because you don't know how the calculator is set up. This mode key here, if I hit that, what this is doing is it's saying, how does the calculator display stuff? It always keeps numbers the same way, very high resolution, but it can display them differently, okay? You want to be set up like this. The first thing is for degrees, normal display, and then this floating thing is how many decimal places. To change it, this thing over here is a cursor pad. It's like the cursor that you have on your computer. So if I hit this, okay, it goes down, and then I can go over to the number. This is just how many decimal places is displayed. It always keeps very high resolution. It's just how much is on the display. So I hit enter, that does that. That sets it to 2 places. Clear gets me back to the real world. And so if I, for example, divide 5 by 7, there are 2 decimal places displayed. If you ever want to see more decimals, this key here, any key that has this forward and back arrow changes the display. It doesn't change the value, it's just the display. So if I hit that, now you see full resolution, and for free, it gives you the fractional equivalent too, okay? So now, let's continue on. The one that I really want to emphasize, because it can come and get you, is this difference between the subtract key and the negative value key, okay? So if I say, 2 minus 3, I get -1. If I say 2 minus -3, okay, I get +5. And that's because, as you all, I'm sure, remember, if you subtract a negative value, it turns into a plus. Minus a minus is a plus. Now, one of the things that you may want to do, and the calculator is really useful for, is if you're a little shaky on exactly how negative numbers work. Okay, so for example, if I had -3 divided by -6, okay, it's +0.5. It's not -0.5. So if you want to just play around with a calculator, it can be very useful just to get your head straight about how negative numbers work. Okay, let's continue on here. Where'd my cursor go here? The next thing I want to talk about is more of the switching formats. Okay, we've got 0.5 up here, okay? If I want to see that as a fraction, okay, as I showed you before, any of these keys that have the plus and minus, there's one here, there's a couple up here which are used for fractions that I'll talk about in a second, and there's one down here for percent. Now notice that these guys are all printed in green above the key. anything that's printed in green, you get to the second key, okay? So for example, this guy here, this fraction to decimal, hang on a second, I lost my cursor here. This one here switches between fractions and decimals. So to get to that, if I just hit this, I'd go into table mode, which is a whole different thing we're not going to talk about. First of all, I hit the second key, then I hit this, okay? And it goes into this weird display where it's showing you that it's going to change the fraction into a decimal. That F to D means fraction and decimal. Hit enter, and I get 1/2, okay? It'll go the other way. If I hit this again and that, oh, hang on. Let me do a different one. The problem I'm having is that this emulator does not work particularly well. All right, let's do a different one. Let's do the one that's in the display. 15 divided by 7 equals, okay. So if I want to change that to show it as a fraction, again, I do the, oh God, this thing. Sorry. Again, I hit the second fraction, enter. Now this is showing it as a straight fraction, but it's an improper fraction. You know, it's 15 divided by 7. This other one here, which you notice it shows u and then denominator over numerator over denominator, this will show it as a compound fraction. Okay, so I hit that, that, and now it's showing you as a compound fraction. This stuff is, again, it's really very, very useful to play around with to get a feeling for how fractions work. All right, let me go back to this, see if I can get my display to do something useful. All right. The next, we're going to talk about fractions at the end of this thing if we have time, because the fractions on this calculator are very, very useful. But right now, what I want to do is talk about good old PEMDAS. These parentheses here are essential for use if you're doing anything complex, okay? So if we start out 3 times 2 plus 3 divided by 4, okay, we get one answer. Because what you're doing here, sorry, hang on. Why am I doing this? I'm back. I have no idea what happened there. All right. I'm going to redo this now with the, hang on just one second, get my pen back here. What I'm going to do is redo this with parentheses. Okay, so if I do, just hit the parentheses and then type in whatever the expression is that you want. Okay, so I'm going to do the same expression, but with different parentheses. 3 times 2 plus 3. Now, remember to close the parentheses. Now, when I do this, I get a very different number. And the reason is that it first does everything inside the parentheses. It calculates that. So this is 3 times 2 is 6, plus 3 is 19. And then after it's done everything inside there, then it divides it by 4. Okay, and so that's what you get. Okay. Let me show you, I wanted to show you what errors look like just so you don't get freaked out by them. Okay, so if I do, say I did 3, and I use this rather than the subtract key. I said minus 2. All right, this kind of looks okay, but it's not. When I hit enter, what's going to happen is I'm going to get a syntax error. Syntax error just means the calculator has no idea what you're talking about. The way to fix that is easy. Don't panic, first of all. Hit the clear button, and the cursor will be blinking at the point where the calculator lost track of what you were trying to do. If I just type the subtract key here, it will replace it. Now when I hit enter, I get the right answer. The bottom line on these errors is don't freak out. Hit the clear key, then just edit the thing, edit the expression to get what you want. And I'll show you more about editing in just a second. All right. In fact, we're going to do that right now. If I've got, let's say that I type something in incorrectly. Okay, so what I'm typing in all right, so I've typed this in, but it's wrong. Rather than 8.55, what I want to have is 8.415. Now, this is where these cursor keys come in, okay? If the square block is blinking, it means that it will replace whatever it's on. So I'm going to move this over here, okay? And I'm just going to type in a 4, and it just replaces it. Now, I want to put a 1 in here between the 4 and the 5. To do that, I have to go into insert mode. Now, when you've been working with computers using a normal editor, you're almost always in insert mode. When you type a character, it doesn't replace the character you're on, it sticks it in the middle there. This calculator is different. Its default is overwrite mode. To get to insert, that's what this thing up here is. So I hit second and that, and now see it's changed to a blinking underscore. If I type a 1 in now it inserts it, it didn't overwrite it. Just hit enter, and there's my answer, okay? These things are really very, very useful. The other thing that you can do is if you type in a number, but you mess up, you wanted that to be, in fact, a 7, not a 6. The delete key up here, just hit that and it will delete it, and then you can type the 7 in, and there's your, that's what you get. There's a whole lot of other editing stuff that you can do with this calculator, but this is the most useful stuff. If you can get this under control, it'll help you a lot, particularly with complex expressions. All right, I'm going to continue on here, hopefully without blowing everything up. All right, I'm going to show you the calculator's handling for percents. The reality is that the percent function is not particularly useful on this calculator. All that it really does is just divide by 100. But if you want to do stuff showing percents, or if you want to just play around with it so that you can get a feeling for percents, then it's useful. So for example, if I type in 8, now the percent is again up here in the green, so I have to type second first, and percent, okay, and now it says 8%. If I hit enter, it's just taking the 8 and dividing by 100, but that's all a percent is. It's per 100. Okay, so there's no magic here. It allows you to put the 8 in and then use it as a fraction, or you could do something like 15% times 3%, and that'll give you, see now, but the reason it shows 0 is because 2 decimal places isn't enough to display it. So now I'm going to hit this button and show the whole number, okay? Don't be freaked out if you get answers like 0 when you think you should have something. Just hit the convert button here and it'll show you the whole value. Okay. You can also convert a number, okay, to a percent. Okay, so now I'm going to show you something else here. What I'm going to do, I'm not going to type anything in. I'm just going to hit second, and then this, again, this arrow says go to percent. So I do that, and there it is, 0.45. Now notice this is 0.45%. This is less than 1%, okay? And that's what the conversion changed 0.0045 into 0.45%. All right, so that's what this conversion to percent does. All right, as I say, this calculator is not really very good on percent. Their business calculators are much better at it, but you can get something out of it.
Ralph, I have a question about that.
Yes.
Why does 0.0045%? Oh, it's okay. It's not percent. It's in decimal, and then changing to percent.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All
Yeah.
right, cool.
Yeah. The 0.0045 is this thing that we got, you know, because we were showing 0 here. Well, that's stupid. Secretly over here where you can't read it, it's actually 0.0045. This changed it in percent, which essentially just divides by 100. So it's just moving the decimal point over 2, and you've got a fraction of a percent. Everybody good with that? All right, on we go. How are we doing on time here?
Yeah, 10 more minutes.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Now I'm going to do fractions. This calculator is really good with fractions, and I encourage you to play around with it because it's good, obviously, on a test to get the right answer, but it's also very, very good just to play around with to get a feeling for how fractions work. All right, so let's clear this whole mess out here. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to enter a fraction, and I'm going to use the mixed. For simple fractions, you can just hit this key. Okay. Notice that it's set the thing up as a fraction. All right. If I want to put in, 5/7. All right. So I hit the 5. Now, hit the cursor key, it goes down to the bottom, enter the 7. Now you can keep going. I mean, you can put a multiple digit fraction here if you want to. In fact, you can go back up and play around with the numerator too. When you're done, hit the enter key, and there's your answer. And if you want to see it as a decimal, again, just go to the convert, and there it is. Okay, now let's do something a little more complex though. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to enter a mixed fraction and then do an operation on it. This one, notice it's just numerator over denominator. So that's just a straight up fraction. Up here though, it shows you U, which means units, and then numerator over denominator. So that's going to give you, that allows you to enter a mixed number. Again, it's green, hit that, hit that. Now, oh, whoops, sorry. Let me try that again. There we go. So now you just put the stuff in. Okay, so that's my whole number. I want to get up to the numerator, so I hit the cursor key here. Okay, that puts me up into the numerator. I enter my numerator. I do it again to get to the next field, which is in the bottom. Okay, and there's my 5/7. Now, if you want to do more, remember, if you type here, you're going to be entering it in the numerator. You have to use the cursor to get out of the what is this thing doing? I don't know how much of this you can see. Anyway, you have to get out of this in order to keep entering data. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to multiply this. So I hit the multiply, okay, and it goes in. And so now I've got a fraction and a multiply. What you see is what you get with this calculator, which is really nice. Now I'm going to enter another fraction. So I use the ordinary fraction key. okay? And I'm going to enter the 4/5. 4, cursor, 5, and that's it, I'm done. Hit enter, and there's your answer. Now, obviously, that's a pretty weird answer. You know, I mean, it's correct, but it's not very useful because it's an improper fraction. Up here, again, are these conversion things. And this one here, if you notice, goes back and forth between a regular fraction and a mixed number. So I'm just going to take that, again, second because it's green over there, enter, and there we have it as a mixed number. If you wanted to see it as a decimal, this one here, see the F back and forth D, that means fraction and decimal. So I hit that, and there it is as a decimal. Okay. These fraction functions are very, very useful. This calculator does fractions very well, and I encourage you, if you're a little shaky on fractions, just play around with this thing. The calculator will give you the right answer. Sometimes it will not be obvious why it's the right answer, but figuring out why it's the right answer is well worth doing. Okay. What are we doing here? Yeah, we're all right. All right. The next thing I want to do is talk about memories. When you're working with a calculator, what a lot of students do is they'll do part of an operation, write the answer down, clear the thing, and then re-enter the number. That's not a good way to do it because you're never going to be as accurate as the calculator. To fix that, there are memories. So if I say 5 divided by 7, okay, enter. Now, I want to use that later on. So all I do is I say, this thing down here, this is the store key. This says which memory to put it into. I'm just going to use the X memory. There are many more memories, but I'm just going to use X because it's easy to do. So I'm going to store this value. I'm going to say store X, enter. And now that's already in the X memory up here. And I'll talk about this answer thing in just a second. So now I want to say 14, okay, and I want to use the X memory. If I want to multiply it by what's in the X memory, I just hit X, and there's my answer. Notice that it was 5/7. Because I multiply it by 14, I'm essentially, it's 5 times 2, and that's where I get my 10. The next thing I want to cover briefly is this guy here, this answer thing. Notice that if I just now say times, I didn't enter a number, okay? I just entered the times, typed in the times button. I didn't put a number in. If you do that, the calculator automatically will say, okay, you must be wanting to work with the last value that you had. Answer is whatever the last calculation resulted in. So now if I say 5, it gives me 50. I can also say, now answer has 50 in it. Okay, so if I say 2 times, and then the answer is up here in this little green thing. So I say second answer, and there's my 100.